excited.
2 and 1, we are live.
Okay, so Senate Government Operations, it is Thursday, May 13th. We have had a little technical difficulty getting started here, but rest assured, we have been doing nothing businesslike. The only thing we've done is try to figure out how to get ourselves hooked up and going. So with that, what I'm going to do is say that we had suggested a modest change to the Wilmington charter change because the bill took effect on July 1st, but the merger was on June 30th. And I sent a note to Representative Gannon and asked him if that was just an oversight or if they really wanted it that way, or if somebody could do some monkey business in the 24-hour period there. And he said it was an oversight and he was glad we caught it. And I told him that our committee was all very, very excited that we were able to catch something that old Eagle Eye Gannon didn't catch. So Representative Gannon, do you want to tell us whether this is the thing to do or not?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Representative Gannon from Wilmington for the record, and I am very happy that Senate Government Operations caught that small error of dates, and I do believe that the date should be the same, which is June 30th of 2021.
Thank you, and I believe Tucker has prepared an amendment for us. Do you want to go through your extensive amendment with us, Tucker?
Sure. Good afternoon, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel. The amendment can be found on the committee's webpage, and the amendment strikes the effective date in the current draft and replaces it with June 30th, 2021 to align the dates with the effective date of the merger. And that is all.
May I interrupt, Tucker? The one that you had sent me, I am now in the process of posting because I did not have any email. So I'm doing that right now. In the meantime, I've sent everyone an email with that attachment.
Okay, great. Thank you. So committee, are we okay with that?
Sorry, Gail. Are you going to be admitting people or do you want me to?
Oh, I will be admitting people. Thank
Okay,
you.
unless you go out of, okay.
So committee, can we agree on this amendment?
Indeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty well written.
I wasn't sure Tucker would have time to do it, but he made the time. Okay, I think that so we will, can we now take a vote on the amendment, I mean on the Wilmington charter change?
Yeah,
Yes.
I just pulled over so I could help with the vote. Is everyone ready?
Are you in the car driving?
I was using my hands free, so I pulled over so I
Okay.
could be here.
Okay,
I'm not trying to be like the Ohio legislator or whoever that was.
okay, Senator
Ready to vote?
Collier, were you going to make a,
I was going to move that we accept the amendment first, Madam Chair.
Yep.
I think properly, yeah. So I will move that the committee vote amend H 443 with draft 1.1.
okay,
Okay,
ready?
Senator Clarkson,
Yes.
Senator Collimore,
Yes.
Senator Polina,
Yes.
myself, Senator Rom, yes, Senator White.
Yes,
And the
Now I will
amendment
further,
Yep.
what's that?
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
passed. That's all.
I will further move that the committee vote out H 443 as amended favorably.
Okay. Senator Clarkson,
Yes.
Senator Collimore,
Yes.
Senator Polina,
Yes.
myself, Senator Rom, yes, Senator White.
Yes. And
5-0.
Senator Collimore, I would ask if you are willing to
Sure.
report it.
Sure.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Okay,
John, good to see you.
thanks, John.
Good to see you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Okay. So I think that we suggested that we would take up the Agency of Public Safety, and we're not going to
But
do much with.
you said you needed to change computers or something.
I am going to run down right now because I think we scheduled that for 1:30.
Oh, you're right. That's true.
And I'm going to run down right now and change computers.
Okay.
Okay.
And Keisha, have you had an opportunity to call your Senate Economic Development appointee people that we're supposed to call?
Are we supposed to call them?
Yeah, we're supposed to be in touch with them.
Oh, I thought we were just supposed to take a vote. I mean, are we supposed to
Oh,
check
we're
to make sure
supposed
they
to.
want to serve or?
So, yeah, exactly. I just called mine. That's the only reason. We just have to talk about them in committee and decide whether or not we want to confirm them.
Yeah, I
Have you
mean,
s-
I'll text Clarence Davis then. I think, I'll text him. I didn't know what exactly we're supposed to do. I can talk about Clarence Davis without,
I think
much
you're supposed
effort.
to interview them and talk to them about why they want to continue, what are the
Are-
challenges they face.
Are these
are they-
people going onto a board or something, you mean?
Yeah, my guy was being appointed to the VEPSI board.
Right.
Are we,
Yeah, we did
are
that
we
a few times.
doing it on the floor? Sorry.
We don't report them on the floor, but we do them as a group.
Mhm.
Um,
Sorry, Anthony. I'll text him now. I'll stop.
No,
my video.
that's fine. No big deal. I was just saying, what I used to do is I would call them and ask if they wanted to serve and if there was anything embarrassing we needed to know about them before they got reappointed.
I forgot to ask that question of this guy named Mark Nicholson. He owns something called Nikon Coatings, something like that.
Oh, I know what you may have seen that. Yeah,
He's your neck of the woods, or his business is.
sounds familiar.
He's
Also,
in
just
Barry.
I just want to make sure. I think we talked about this yesterday, but tomorrow when the little ethics bill comes up on the floor, the Appropriations Committee is going to offer an amendment, and we're going to say it's okay, just so you're not surprised.
So what is the
The
appropriation?
amendment, we said that they could go ahead and hire a part-time administrative assistant. Remember that?
Yep.
It just wasn't phrased right because it didn't make it clear that the legislature is the one who, authorizes new positions. So it's just changed the wording to make it clear that the Ethics Commission is not creating a position. The legislature is creating a position,
Yep.
which the Ethics Committee gets to fill. So it's just a wording thing.
Got it. And Brian, instead of emailing you, which I forgot to do, I didn't forget to last night. I just got on to a conversation with the majority leader in the House that went for an hour, and I lost a lot of my spare time yesterday. So I was going to ask if you'd be kind enough to share your floor speech with me, if you'd be kind enough to send it, because I thought, I thought some of it was really thoughtful and good, as you know, because I texted you about it.
Sure.
That would be great. If you'd email it to me, I'd really appreciate it, because I'm going to just write a short blurb about it, but I thought you had some nice points in it.
I will do it right now. Although I rarely do emails during committee, but since we are not
Well,
technically,
happily, we are on pause.
well, we're on YouTube, but I don't think that matters. Yeah, I will. And just so you know, I think I mentioned yesterday, on the fly, as I was doing it, I realized that if I read everything I had put together, it was just going to be too long. So
Right.
even though the report you received has more in it than I did,
Right.
that's why. Okay.
I will remember that because I remember your floor speech well, and the House likes our changes, except for one change. They have one change
Okay.
that they want to make, but
That
that's
we're just going to accept.
they have one change that I don't think they're happy with our naming the book and the author, because
Really?
nowhere else, with all the research and all the history that's involved, nowhere else do we single out anything in particular. So I think they have some concerned about that.
Hmm.
But other than that, they voted unanimously to accept our changes.
So committee, Michael Sherling will be joining us at 2. He couldn't make it any earlier.
We might even be done by 2.
Tony Fakos, you always look like you're on a golf course with all this green behind you.
Laying down.
Company rules. This is our official background.
What does it say?
It's the Vermont Agency of Transportation.
Oh yeah, I see. You have to kind of get up close to see it. Really? I've seen Michelle Boomhauer without that background. I've seen Joan Flynn without that background. How interesting.
It came from Michelle.
She doesn't use it. Just saying.
Hey, I'm I've been here 10 months. I'm still the new kid on the block here. So I just do as I'm told.
Maybe it's a hazing thing, it's Zoom hazing.
There we go.
So, I don't know who all is going to be with us today. And Tony, I'm happy to see you. What I did was I scheduled this because I didn't want to leave this completely hanging. And I think it's important, in my mind anyway, to assure people that my plan for the committee is that we go forward with this. Clearly, it isn't going to happen this year. And I apologize for that. We got caught up with a bunch of other things. I think that we got off to a kind of a rocky start without a bill, and I should have been more attentive to that and make sure that we had a bill clearly at the beginning. And but I feel it's important to go forward with this issue. And I just wanted to get a sense from people if they felt the same, and from committee members and also from the people out there in the field. So I suspect that the commissioner won't be with us, as he said, until 2 o'clock. And I suspect that he would feel it important to go forward, but I won't speak for him. But so committee members, are you, where are you?
I'm fine with the procedure you just outlined, Madam Chair. I think we could spend the good part of the afternoon fine tuning what we have, and look forward to getting it drafted in January.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm somewhat a skeptic. I started out as a skeptic of this whole process, but I think we've actually made some good progress in this conversation over the last couple of weeks or months, whatever it's been, weeks, months, years. It seems like I've been sitting on this couch forever, but I think we've made some good progress, and so I'm willing to continue to move forward on it.
Senator Clarkson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would echo Anthony's comments. I think that we have made good progress and it's beginning to take shape. And I think actually it solves a lot of administrative, I don't know what the right word is, but I think it streamlines things. I think it improves things. Actually, once we get through to the other end, I think it's going to be a big improvement. And I think we can address some of the concerns that have been raised. And I think this is a positive step forward for public safety, combining and bringing under one umbrella a lot of these areas that address and are our professional public safety arms, divisions.
Senator Rahm, do you feel you?
Yeah, I hope you. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm hands-free, and I echo Senator Polina's comments as well. I would just hope that over the time away, the commissioner could further document the feedback that they received in their public process around modernization and how they incorporated that into this proposal, because I just still don't feel like I have a sense of how they really listened to the people who they engaged in the public participation process.
Okay, yep. And I think that the comments that they received were addressed more than just the reorganization of the department into an agency, but we can ask him to have that more information for us when we come back in January on that. Okay, so I'm going to ask Cindy and Tony what they're feeling on this is whether we go forward. It sounds like the committee wants to move forward.
Cindy, do you want to go first, or? You're muted,
You're
Cindy.
muted though. Okay.
My computer's going a little slow today. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. I think, we're definitely hearing the concerns here, as, Chair Sorrell has mentioned about, roles. And I think the coming year will really help our council kind of solidify mission and direction and things, and that, we'll be in a much better place for conversations about this type of work a year from now than we are right now. So I think it's good, from our perspective, it helps us and the new council sort of get a more solid footing for future conversations. So good from my end.
Okay, good. Thank you. Tony?
Sure. Tony Fakis, Executive Director for Department of, for the Division of Enforcement and Safety, Department of Motor Vehicles. Yeah, I mean, Madam Chair, as you know, I've always, even from the municipal side, been very supportive of regional efforts. I think it is absolutely the future of public safety. That being said, and I'm basing off the last draft that Ameren did, I think the 2.4. Is that?
Yep.
I think
that's the last one we have. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm still cautiously optimistic at this point, but I want to be absolutely clear that I think there's a lot of opportunity and work to still be done. I need to have several conversations, I think, with Commissioner Sherling. Right now, one of the things, though, that's kind of glaring to me in this current draft anyway, just to flag it for everybody, something that's some of the frustration and the concern that my team has. I mean, we've got about 30% of our sworn personnel came from the Vermont State Police. So, I mean, there's various reasons that they are here, and they're very concerned about not being, if, for example, if VSP is short somewhere, could their jobs totally change, and can they be pulled from one division to the other? That was something that was in the original executive order that Commissioner Sherling and I were really careful to make sure that we appropriately had some, I hate using the term silo in a negative sense, but we were, those boundaries were there so that we could maintain our special expertise within motor vehicle enforcement. At the same time, VSP has, what they do. And the current draft is kind of contradictory. If you look at page 6, it just makes reference that how they would be, if under the very first part under B, should not be assigned, transferred outside their division unless the member requests a transfer and the commissioner approves the transfer. And then when you go to page 7, under permissive duties, it makes clear that the commissioner may, with the approval of the secretary, transfer classified positions within and between divisions subject to the state personnel laws and rules, so forth. So anyway, that certainly was of great concern to my team. I just want to make sure that I also don't want to have a mutiny on my hands. I want to make sure that they understand that, they're not just going to be, not being moved around based on what one particular department needs. Because the other thing is, we're clear-eyed that in a crisis, in any major challenge, we will always pitch in. I mean, two of our investigators, for example, sworn personnel, both from one of our detectives and one of our uniform sergeants, were assigned to the Department of Health for contact tracing and provided their expertise to the Department of Health. I mean, so we are committed, as always, to serving Vermonters and supporting all of our fellow law enforcement agencies. So that kind of language, those are some of the details anyway that I want to make sure that we're absolutely are clear on. And I've also already testified, and I've been very consistent with the underpinning of a Bureau of Professional Standards. One of the advantages that's laid out in the very beginning of this is that it streamlines policy. For example, when a policy change needs to be implemented, it's going to be real time for any law enforcement entity within this agency. The other thing, I just, for the sake of discussion, the last testimony, VSP has SPAC. They have that advisory support, and without doing anything to dilute the success of the Vermont State Police, and from including their CALIA accreditation. But I'd like to see opportunities of value added to the motor vehicle department as well, in terms of training, professional opportunity support, as well as internal affairs and accountability. And so it just seems like, where's that specific in this language anyway? How do we add that value to how we operate? Because I think the bottom line is the public expects, regardless of the uniform and the specialty, whether it's a warden or a motor vehicle inspector, certain standards, if they are a sworn law enforcement officer, certain standards must be consistent throughout. And I think that's a great opportunity as we look at police reform and everything that we're doing, and it makes us more nimble as an overall agency in that construct. But in the meantime, I just want to make sure, and I know our union representative is not on this call right now or this hearing, but that's really their concern as well. So I want to make sure that we absolutely are cautious, build this right, because this is a big opportunity, I think, for the state of Vermont to improve public safety, but it has to make sure that it adds value to every entity that comes on board.
So, yes, Senator Colmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Tony, I think you're right. When you read the two different pieces of language regarding, getting switched back and forth between divisions, it does seem like there's some confusion there, at least maybe not confusion, but lack of clarity perhaps. So I do think we probably need to take a look at that. Would you be okay with the ability of someone to move if the employee and, let's just say, a supervisory person both agreed that that's what they wanted to happen?
Absolutely. That was in the mechanics of even the original executive order. They would still, the employee would have to, make that request to transition. And then, of course, would need to be approved based on those operational needs of each division under that department.
And I take your other point well too, that the training and the potential for advancement and that sort of thing. I think it should mirror what we have for the VSP, and that makes a lot of sense to me.
Thank you.
So it might be, if I can suggest that over the break before we come back in January, that you might work with the commissioner around the language, particularly on page 7 there, that just seems to contradict what the other language says, and see if we can come up with some language that makes it clear that there can, in time of crisis or something, that there will be cross-pollination, but that it won't be willy-nilly just capricious transfers, because that does sound like it could be here, just the secretary and the commissioner making the switch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of that too is language we can probably revitalize from part of the original executive order, that 68-page document, where we did kind of spell that out initially. But your point's well taken, Madam Chair.
And I also, in terms of what Senator Colmore was saying around the making sure that that there's value added to the DMV positions and how that making it kind of the equivalent of the VSP, how if there's language that should be in here around how to achieve that. I mean, we can't in statutes, we don't get so detailed about everything, but if it's something that could be in here that would make it clear and then established by rule or something.
Yeah, I mean, my point was not so much to, like, for example, a lieutenant here at Motor Vehicle has a very different mission from a lieutenant in the Vermont State Police, especially when I think about a station, a station commander. And I'm not looking for necessarily, equality there in terms of that. But what I am thinking about, though, more broadly is as you look at professional standards, the training component opportunities that to get really to maximize the intent and expected outcome of an agency that would have those opportunities, as well as the accountability piece. As I've said in previous testimony, for example, the internal affairs process for accountability is very different for anybody outside the Vermont State Police that's still sworn, whether you're Fish and Wildlife or Department of Liquor Control or any of our folks. And I think, again, I'd like to see, is to get to that consistency as well. And so that's what I meant by that. Whether that model, I mean, I've bounced off some ideas with the commissioner, Commissioner Sherling, on some of my vision on what that could look like, where there's absolute buy-in from both divisions to support something along the lines of, again, a bureau, if you will, for example, of professional standards. That's not specific within either division, but above both divisions, but under this what would become the commissioner of the Department of Law Enforcement, as an example of what I mean by that.
Any other questions or comments for Tony, or in general? I had a conversation with a sheriff one day about, because this really only this doesn't impact at all our municipal departments or our county sheriffs or our constables, because this is just really an reorganization at the state level. But we were wondering if somehow under this, I think the commissioner called it Division of Support Services, if the support services that are there that are intended for the other sworn law enforcement officers could also be extended to the sheriffs and some small municipal departments that just don't have the capability of doing all that, like grant writing and personnel work and all of those things. I have no idea if that's even possible, but I think it might be something that we can explore over the summer to find out if it's even possible at all. Allison, Senator Clarkson?
No, Allison's fine. I think that's a really worthy thing to research, because once this becomes an agency, it has the possibility of becoming really a resource for all of law enforcement and all of public safety. And we don't necessarily know how that might look 10 years from now, but I think it would be an interesting avenue to explore, particularly as we really have been wanting to regionalize a lot of these services for a whole host of reasons. And I think that would be a great thing to explore.
And I'm not sure how you would do it, but I think that right now within the department, which would still be within the agency, the emergency management does provide assistance and support to local emergency management people, and fire safety does the same, but we
Yeah.
haven't done that with law enforcement. So I just don't know how that could work, but
Well,
I think
I would agree, because it also begins to get at reducing the sort of the patchwork problem, and maybe creates a framework for coordination in a more consistent way.
yeah. And if you think about it, if you have a small department or a sheriff's office with few employees, if they each have to duplicate all of those administrative services, that's a lot of inefficiencies and a lot of, I don't know if it would work or not at all, but it's something that I've been thinking about and have had some conversations with some sheriffs. And yeah, Senator
I
Polina?
think it's a good thought.
Yep.
I do. No, I do. I think providing resources to the local communities that have little police forces at all, could be really helpful.
I mean, even just around hiring somebody, how do you go about hiring? How do you review resumes? What do you look for? How do you just, because
Well,
they
I think
don't-
being made aware of state and federal money that's available, like
Yeah.
you said, writing grants. I mean, that could be really helpful. We did a little bit of that, it's different but similar, in agriculture, where we assigned these grant writers to work with farmers and local communities around the state who don't have the resources to write their own grants. And it's generated like a huge amount of money for those communities that they wouldn't have gotten if it wasn't for the help they got in terms of facilitating the grant preparations.
That's interesting. Yeah. Huh. So the other thing I have been mulling around in my head a lot is this report that was put out by the auditor. And I don't know exactly what to do with it, because in my mind, it's, and I like our auditor a lot, and I think he does wonderful things, but in my mind, this is many people associate public safety with law enforcement. And this report on the local and state spending on public safety lumps in everything. It lumps in all of the judiciary and all of the sheriffs and the defender general and the state's attorneys, court diversion, 911, the justice, the training, the justice council, criminal justice council, Woodside, victim services. It's all in here under public safety, but it gives the impression that we are spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on public safety, when in fact, if you break it down, what's being spent on actual law enforcement is very little compared to that whole. So I don't know what to do with this, but I know that it's out there and that people have commented on it. So does anybody have any suggestions about where we might, or should we just ignore it?
I don't think we want to ignore it. I think it would be helpful to clarify what we consider public safety, and that we don't actually consider, I mean, I don't consider any of the court. I think of the judicial branch as being very different. I mean, it would be interesting for us to actually define for state government. I mean, I'm sure we have it in the statute somewhere where public safety is defined.
I don't know.
But I think that would be helpful, because
Yeah.
otherwise you're going to have reports like this where he drew in unnecessarily, I think, whole areas that I'm not sure are under that umbrella. So,
And corrections is in there also.
yeah. And so I think that bears further discussion, which is really clarifying, as we look at the agency, clarifying what we consider public safety.
Senator Colmer, I saw you had your hand up.
I did. Senator Clarkson spoke pretty much to my point. What I would suggest is whether the auditor wants to do it or someone that has the report and can kind of divide up, you know, how much is spent on judicial matters, how much is spent with corrections, and get a fair number for what is public safety and law enforcement. Because I agree with you. I think that the number is probably swollen to a point where it looks much bigger than it really is.
I actually have done that.
Oh, well,
And I mean, it kind of is in here broken down. And like there's $162 million by cities and towns. But again, it lumps in their law enforcement, their emergency planning, their EMS systems, if they operate their own ambulances, all of that. And the Department of Public Safety itself is $109 million. And that is more than just law enforcement. I mean, I think we need to, my concern is that there has been concern about the making the agency, that it's creating a super police agency, which I think it's actually doing the opposite. But I think we need to be very clear about what is spent on law enforcement so that we can look at that. It just law enforcement itself. So anyway, that's just I don't know how to approach this. If we, I'll send out some figures to everybody before then so that we can actually look at it. But so, yeah, I'll do that. I don't know what else to do with this report, except to just.
Well, one thing
Yeah,
we,
go ahead.
one thing
Go
we,
ahead. Yeah.
One thing we could do is actually ask the auditor to streamline the report and have their office focus and maybe pull out the areas we consider public safety as we look to actually define public safety in the creation of this agency, which I think it should be part and parcel of that work. And that if he was willing to actually pull out and do an edit or a draft 2 of his report, which just pulled out the areas we consider part of public safety, which you've done. It sounds like you've done that work. And
Yeah.
if areas he feels that as we go into this work of establishing an agency, if there are areas he feels we need to pay particular attention to as we go through that process, I think that would be valuable. But I think we need to streamline it so that we're all on the same page with what we're talking about.
So maybe what, because he does the way, here's his definition of public safety: the efforts of any government agency, department, or subunit whose mission relates directly to ensuring the safety and security of Vermont residents.
Well, but that's entire state government. I mean, I think that's our primary purpose.
Well, that's how he defines it. I'll send out some of these numbers here so that we can just have a better sense of what we're talking about, because I just don't want people to think that when I'm linking this with the creation of the agency, I don't want people to look at the creation of what some people think of as a super police agency and then look at this auditor's report that says we spend $574 million on public safety, and use that as fodder for the discussion.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
to be fair, I don't consider the public defender to have anything, well, it might have something to do with public safety. But let me put it the other way. When I think of public safety, I'm not thinking of the public defender.
So maybe a way of doing it is to look at the agency. If we were to create an agency, how much of this money would be assigned to the from the different departments, the Vermont State Police, Department of Motor Vehicles, Home Emergency Management, Fire Safety, and do it that way so that we can actually see how it relates to the creation of an agency.
I think that makes
That
sense.
would be great.
Yeah.
All right, I'll work on that. Any other specific comments on where we were with the bill?
I don't have that. They canceled it.
Oh, okay.
What, what are we calling the bill at the moment? Is it Ameren? Is it under Ameren's name?
Yes, and it's draft request 210890. And what I think makes sense is to have, if Tony can work on some language here and anybody else who has concerns about specific language, Cindy, if the council has specific language concerns or anything, is try to get it together and we'll get it to Ameren and then we'll introduce it as a bill so that when we come back in January, there's an actual bill with a number. But we've worked out a lot of the issues before we actually get the bill.
Can we make it a committee bill?
We can.
Yeah.
But if we make it a committee bill, we won't have a bill for people to respond to until we get back, because I'm not sure if we're ready with this draft to make it a committee bill. And so what I mean, we can all, or any of us can sponsor it, but I think we need to have something in bill form for people to respond to in January. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Makes sense.
That makes sense because then we have something for people to respond. Yes, we have a foundation for discussion.
Yeah, because it's been so fluid that it's hard for people, I think, to comment on it and make comments and stuff. And I've had a bunch of meetings in my community with people, and most people have said they support the concept and support the idea of making it truly a public safety agency instead of the Department of Public Safety is so kind of associated with the troopers that it's hard for people to get past that. So what I've heard in my community is that people support the reorganization. They just don't know the details yet. So I think that would be helpful.
I agree.
Okay. All right, so do we want to go spend more time going through the bill? Does anybody have other specific issues that they would like to have worked on over the summer, fall? And I will be happy to work with them.
Well, I just appreciated Mr. Fakis's articulation of a Department of Professional Standards or some kind of quality oversight entity that sits above all of the other divisions. And I think it could do a lot around justice oversight and inclusion.
Isn't that what the role of the council?
I think to some extent, but I haven't yet heard that the council has direct supervisory power. So they might hear something when it becomes an issue or when someone's being trained to become a police officer, but there's a lot of other time and space in between before something rises to the level of investigation that I think requires ongoing supervisory work.
I'm not sure how that, well, we'll have to think about that because I'm not sure. I don't know, Tony, what you were referring to. Were you referring to some kind of a board that oversaw professional standards other than the council, or what were you?
Yeah, I know Commissioner Shirley's now on the
Oh, good.
screen as well. my thought was simply an expansion of, the Office of Professional Standards that they have within the Vermont State Police, and the commissioner could speak more to that. I was looking at more in the context of broadening that entity, so it would have direct ability to, it would, for example, tracking the training and providing training priorities and goals. That would be where their universal training needs, regardless of the specialty of the law enforcement function, but also the internal affairs process. So again, anybody that is under the Department of Law Enforcement would be held to a certain standard. Does not mean that we would all necessarily have the same. I mean, again, we would have some different policy for motor vehicle that are specific to commercial vehicle enforcement, for example. But on the issues that we're really faced with, anybody that is a sworn law enforcement officer, those standards, there has to be a direct mechanism, I think, to not only provide the training and the support mechanisms, but also the accountability piece. And it's just like the internal affairs process. Earlier you mentioned what municipalities are doing. I do know that the chiefs are working hard to come up with a way to develop capacity to handle internal affairs. They're trying to get a pool of investigators around the state that have gone to specialized training on how to conduct internal investigations. Because there's a lot of pieces to that. And so everybody's trying to get to, I think, the same place. And it's only my idea. It was a thought of how do we do that would support, for example, the motor vehicle enforcement division, again, not to do anything that would dilute Vermont State Police, but how do we enhance it for any other division that falls under the Commissioner of Law Enforcement.
So maybe let me just think this out. Maybe that one of the support services under the Division of Support Services is some kind of an internal investigations or something, and that we just need to make sure that it cooperates or coordinates with the council so that we're but that would then maybe be able to provide the same kind of support to the municipal PDs who are looking for some kind of support and commonality and how to do it without each having to have their own, I don't know. So Commissioner Sherling, I'm glad you joined us, and I apologize for not, for it being May 13th and we're still here. But what I wanted to do today was to find out from the committee and from others. It was my feeling that we should go forward with this bill and have a bill in January that is as well thought out as possible and has as many kinks worked out as possible, so that we can actually move it relatively quickly in January. And so what we're doing today is just kind of thinking of what might need to go into the bill to have it as ready as possible. And Tony has suggested a couple areas where he and you are going to work on some language. And then we started talking about, I had mentioned that I've talked to a couple sheriffs that we were just playing with the idea of, under the Division of Support Services that you have in here, can sheriffs and maybe even municipal PDs contract with the agency under the Division of Support Services to receive some of those support services that they themselves can't supply, because it's very inefficient for everybody to have their own grant writer or human resources person or whatever it is. So then we got into the conversation of internal investigations and how that might work. So that's where we are.
Got it. Thanks for having me back. For the record, Mike Sherling, Commissioner of Public Safety. I should check in and just make sure you can't hear the chainsaw that's outside. Okay,
Can't hear.
perfect. We would be open to a discussion of providing additional support services to other organizations. I would suggest that it probably makes sense to do that in an iterative fashion and not try to put that into the first version of if an agency were to come to fruition next year, to put it in immediately, just because we wouldn't want to overcomplicate transitions and make sure we could spend the requisite time ensuring that the few components we've contemplated initially are brought together effectively. I did listen in on just in the last few minutes on the discussion of both professional standards and internal affairs. So the committee is aware, in statute, you created many decades ago a very distinct split where the Office of Internal Affairs reports directly to me outside the chain of command of the state police, and then reports directly to the State Police Advisory Commission. That's done very intentionally. There could be advantages to expanding the scope of that office and potentially even of SPAC. I don't want to speak on their behalf because they are an independent entity. But it would be an interesting exploration to expand the scope of SPAC's work. I would stop short of saying that that would work outside of state government, but it would be an interesting exploration to look at SPAC being a piece of the puzzle for the other state law enforcement entities that are contemplated to come into the agency either initially or potentially in the future. And using that internal affairs investigatory model in the same fashion where it is very specifically independent of the command structure of those organizations and reports to the, in this case, the commissioner, in the case of an agency, the secretary directly. I will flag on the conversation around internal affairs and municipal departments and sheriffs. That gets quite a bit more complicated in part because they have different they're different governmental structures and are completely independent of the state and have different rules and regulations in many instances. And on key topics, we're moving toward having universal rules and policies, but there are differences based on municipal regulations, municipal charters, et cetera. So that's probably not, at this point in the evolution, something that works. But I will flag for you that the chiefs and sheriffs have put forth a framework in response to our 10-point plan that we put forward last year. They came up with a framework that is ready to be explored on improving and making more independent internal investigations to then report back through the government structures that they would be working for, whether it be a sheriff's office or a municipal government or whatever the case may be. It's just important to note that there are elected officials. In the case of a sheriff, they're the elected official. In the case of municipalities, there's 7 mayors, there are select boards, and in many cases, there are appointed town managers that have oversight. And so it's really the investigative component that needs the consistency, and then the oversight is done by whoever the elected officials are in those particular jurisdictions. Just flag one other thing for you, which is the relationship between, and I'll talk specifically about the state police, the relationship between internal affairs, the State Police Advisory Commission, and the Criminal Justice Council, which you have over the years given more and more responsibility, I think rightfully so, and a well-designed system to sorry, I'm a little distracted by the noise. I'm glad you can't hear it, but it's interrupting my thought process just a touch. Professional standards and certifications. So the importance of that is that not only do you have a track to hold officers and personnel in general accountable through an internal affairs process relative to the rules, but there's a parallel process relative to certification, decertification, and accountability. And the relationship there is that for the state police in particular, the Office of Internal Affairs regularly, as necessary, reports any violations of rules, any findings that I make, and SPAC upholds to the Criminal Justice Council for certification action. And that's how those two things are connected, and those parallel processes work. I'll stop there.
That's good. And I think that Cindy spoke earlier about how in a year they will be in a much better position to kind of weigh in on the details of what we're talking about and how all this relationship works. And we acknowledge that they only really got going in January with this new structure. So, and I just to go back when you were talking about that there's different because of the different kind of municipalities and sheriffs and stuff. But what I was thinking of was just the investigative part of it, that because Tony mentioned that a number of the chiefs were trying to figure out how to maybe hire a pool of investigators that they could draw on. And I was thinking maybe that pool of investigators is the same pool of investigators that is used by the agency, but it was just a thought.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that model has efficacy. That shared model where one of the most important components is there's two that stand out. One is having folks that are trained in internal affairs specifically, so it's not just whoever you happen to have available picking off the shelf, because there are legal issues and there are nuances to those investigations that are different than criminal investigations, although the same skill sets apply and overlap in much of the case. They're not entirely overlapping. The other is that ensuring that whoever is doing the investigations has no pre-existing relationship with the person being investigated. And that's pretty easy, that they're not friends or haven't worked together. It becomes a little harder when you're trying to get complete detachment. They've never done a case together. They've never had to back each other up. And that pool, statewide pool with regions to pull from is, I think, a great model to be able to do that, where people are completely disconnected, may have heard a name, but have never met this person before, and can go do an independent investigation without, I should be really clear, without the perception that there is an issue. Even in smaller organizations that I have been a part of, the fact that people know each other does not typically play into an internal investigation. I've said this repeatedly, and I've heard just about every chief in Vermont and elsewhere say this: we are our own worst critics. When something goes badly, we tend to actually go a little overboard in terms of what we think the repercussions should be. So tempering that is sometimes important.
Nice, good question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Commissioner, would you also agree that it's not ideal for the person to have been part of the department or agency being investigated?
It depends on the circumstances. In the case of the state police, there are 300 troopers spread across the state in 212 towns and 10 barracks. You achieve the same goal by being able to assign a captain from southern Vermont who's never met a trooper from northern Vermont. And I would think the same could apply even in a smaller organization like the Department of Motor Vehicles. In Burlington, for example, we would assign folks that were in different divisions, and there are generational differences between folks. So you can get detachment in many instances. It does become more and more difficult when you're in a very small PD and everyone's working together. So I think there's an advantage both to the perception of the independence of the investigation, but also we shouldn't discount the importance of not putting other employees in a difficult position to have to investigate when you only have 5 people and 20% of the department's investigating another 20% of the department. That gets, like I said, much easier when you get to a larger organization where there are distinct differences in divisions and geography. So the more simplistic answer is it depends, but in some instances you are right, Senator.
Small state, it's hard to get independence from around anything. I'm going to call on Senator Collmore, but many years ago, my car broke down on 91 right near Randolph, and I got it down to Randolph and they were working on it, and I decided to go have lunch while I was waiting, and I was sitting there and I did not know a soul in Randolph. This was years ago, and this guy walked in and said, "Oh, I know you." He happened to be the town manager of Randolph, and I was on the community development board, and I said, "Oh my God, you got to be careful wherever you go in this state." So anyway, Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I want to step outside the investigative world for just a second. The commissioner mentioned, many different governmental kind of structures with regard to our law enforcement community. But I think to the average Vermonter, there's got to be a pretty common perception of what our professional standards are, regardless of whether you're a sheriff or a constable or a Vermont State Police officer or a local PD. And I'm just wondering how different that governmental structure is really in the end, in the eyes of what we might consider a typical citizen.
No, that's a great question, Senator, and thank you for allowing me to clarify. It really, what I'm speaking to is really more the process than anything. The code of conduct for law enforcement is pretty well galvanized. It's actually called the code of conduct. The general rules are pretty well galvanized. Individual operating policies do differ based on geography, resources, et cetera. So for example, the policies that the state police have do differ in a number of ways from the policies that I wrote when I was in Burlington, because the urban, I say that with a little u, it's as urban as we get. The urban operating environment is quite different than the rural operating environment that the state police operate in. And as a result, the policies and procedures that govern those operations are different. What I was really talking about was that there's a municipal human resource process that's been established. Those do differ in terms of flow based on a variety of different factors. And that's what we have to be deferential to on that, in that particular lane of travel relative to adherence to policy and procedure and the rules of that particular government entity that the agency operates under. The advantage to what's been developed in recent years in professional standards is, in addition to that, there are universal professional standards that the Criminal Justice Council has. So even if something doesn't pass muster for being a terminable offense in a municipality or in the state, it is conceivable that at a state level relative to certification, you have deemed that is something that should be decertified, and you have a parallel track to do that.
I also want to, just for the record, mention that I think Senator White is correct. In many people's eyes, the Vermont State Police equal law enforcement in Vermont to a great degree. I think that's what people think of when they think of that. And I think at one time it might have been true that the Vermont State Police officers were the, quote, most professional of all of the law enforcement that we had. I'm not sure that's true anymore. I know many municipal law enforcement officers, local PD, sheriffs that get an equal amount of good training and that do very good work and act as sort of just another piece of law enforcement, if you will. So just for the record, I appreciate the work that all of law enforcement does in the state.
I appreciate that, Senator. I think you're right. I've watched for the last 30 years as the level of professionalism has increased exponentially. Some of the people that I was hired with originally had never been to a police academy. It didn't exist when they came on board. That is no longer the case, but it wasn't that long ago that there were still people in the profession who didn't have the benefit of training because it hadn't been developed yet. So I think that's right. And I think in Vermont, we do lose sight of this among all the challenges we have, that Vermont is very fortunate to have a very high level of professionalism, high level of training, well-run police academy, and knock on wood, relative to many other places that are less fortunate than us, are in pretty good shape. Lots of work to do. But I would put our folks against just about anybody in the country in terms of capacity, professionalism, et cetera.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you. And did you know that, this is just an aside, but did you know that you don't have to be a certified law enforcement officer to be a sheriff? Anybody, I could run for sheriff if I wanted to.
Yes.
I did know that.
Yeah.
It used to be you didn't have to be an attorney to be a state's attorney. That you fixed that.
We fixed that.
We fixed that, but we haven't fixed the sheriff yet.
Are we able to fix that, or is that's not constitutional what its requirements are?
No, and I don't know that there probably wouldn't be many instances where a non-law enforcement person would run for sheriff anyway, because it would surface so fast. Well, no, what would happen is that they could only do the administrative parts of the job. They'd have to hire somebody to do the law enforcement parts. They're not going to like that, because that means they have two positions sharing one budget, having one salary. So I don't think that's likely to happen.
Well, and also they get stuck doing the paperwork instead of the grunt work, instead of actually having the fun of being law enforcement.
Right. They don't get to ride in a car with a bubble on the top.
Right.
Tony, what were you doing there?
You're muted, Tony.
Still doing it.
My apologies. I was just talking to the commissioner real quick on something. The other commissioner.
No, it's fine. I just thought it was pretty funny. Anybody else have? So here's what I'm going to suggest. We look at this bill. We've asked Tony and the commissioner to work on a couple parts here. We'll ask the council to look at their parts in here. Do we need to add something, take something away, change something? If there are other issues that come up, and then I will work with Ameren. Oh, and Commissioner, if you want to work with Ameren also, until to make sure that we have something by January, and when Ameren gets it into some kind of shape that isn't final but is presentable, then I'll see if anybody else on the committee wants to co-sponsor, and we'll have a bill by the first day when we come back in January.
That sounds great. Unless there's an objection, I think the starting point would be the committee's last draft, and
Yeah.
We'll work from there.
Yeah, and there were a couple things in here that Tony brought up that just to make some clarifications in the language, and we'll go through it and see what other changes. I don't know if we ever changed our the name of what I had suggested, unfortunately, as a community relations office, and the suggestion that I've heard from my constituents is community engagement. And I don't know if that's in here or not, but we'll make sure that that gets in here with some language.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm going to apologize for my, what turned out to be, in this case, my lack of planning skills and not getting this done earlier. But I think that we're in a much better place than if we had tried to pass something earlier. I think that we're end up with much more support.
In the grand timeline of the Agency of Public Safety discussion, the last 5 months is a drop in the 51-year bucket.
I was going to say exactly that.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Thank you.
And unless
very much.
anybody else has anything they're dying to say, I think, can the committee stay on for just a little while?
Sure.
Sure.
Thank you, Cindy, Tony.